Good evening and welcome to this session marking the Contemporary Martyrs Day. On 15th of February each year, the Coptic Orthodox Church worldwide commemorates the lives of its contemporary martyrs on the anniversary of the martyrdom of the 21 men executed by Daesh in Libya on 15 February 2015. 20 of the 21 martyrs were Coptic Orthodox Christians from Upper Egypt, with the 21st being the Ghanaian friend Matthew. This year, as we mark the Contemporary Martyrs Day, we'll hear from incredible people who spend their lives advocating on behalf of those who often cannot advocate for themselves, giving the voice to those who have been silenced and empowering them to tell their stories. And now, without further ado, I will give the floor to His Eminence Archbishop Angelos, the director of Refcemi.
Thank you, Evelina. And it's a joy to have you all with us, but not necessarily a joy for gathering for this. Our Contemporary Martyrs Day marks the lives of men, as Evelina said, 20 of them Coptic Christians and one a Ghanaian friend, who were murdered, who were executed because of their faith. And while we mark the 11th anniversary of that incident, which I think had an impact on the whole world, we recognize that this is not something that is peculiar just to the Coptic Orthodox Church or Christians. From a Christian perspective, we do understand that persecution will come if we're trying to be faithful, but we also understand that as part of our Christian calling, we must be advocates for all. We must be advocates for those who, like us, might be persecuted, marginalized, or suffer greatly just for having a faith or belief. To be clear, my faith is Christian, and I very much believe in that, but I also believe that God created us free, and He leaves us an opportunity to choose. And if people choose to be of other faiths or beliefs, that comes back to them. I may disagree fundamentally with that faith or belief, but I will always believe in the fundamental sanctity of life and human dignity that God has intended for all of us. When God created us, He created us all equal. He gave us the opportunity to choose or reject Him. And for that reason, Refcemi was established, so that we can, in our own way, advocate for others. I'm very thankful to all of our panelists, all dear friends and people who will give you incredibly powerful stories. I'm thankful to my whole team, and I'll say more about that later. But for now, please listen, take notes, and above all, when we finish this, we want the message to go beyond this meeting, and we want to be able to continue with one another, calling for the rights of every person to live, proclaim, and relish their faith or belief. So thank you, Evelina, and I'll speak again at the end.
Thank you very much, Sayedna. And now I would like to give the floor to Huan Omar, who is the country director for Free Yazidi Foundation, and she will share with us a story of the Yazidi community. Huan, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Huan. I'm today here to represent the Yazidi community. As a witness and a survivor of a genocide, I want to say that I'm today speaking not only on behalf of myself, but also on the behalf of other voices who are silenced and who are still struggling to be heard. The Yazidis are an ethnic and religious minority native to northern Iraq who have faced persecution and discrimination for thousands of years because of who they are. In 2014, the Islamic State and ISIS had a genocidal campaign against the Yazidis in Sinjar, where thousands of Yazidis were executed, women and girls were enslaved. And for us, the genocide was a deliberate and organized campaign that included mass killing and also forced religious conversion, sexual violence, and the militarization of children and mass displacement to date. For us, those atrocities were not incidental. They were tools of cultural erase aimed to destroy the Yazidi identity and eradicate the Yazidis. And for myself and my people, faith was not only something we believed in, it became something we were punished for throughout history until today. For me, persecution was not only like a distant event, it was more of looking at it on personal level. For me, it meant losing people that I loved. 11 years now, I, like thousands of Yazidis who are still waiting for their missing ones. I'm also one of the thousands who have lost my aunt, and with 7 of her children since to date. We have no information about to locate the fate of my aunt, like thousands of other Yazidis. For me, this meant also this genocide being to forcibly flee your home because of who you are. For me, it meant carrying the memories that follows me where I go, when I'm crossing a border, when I am trying to find a safety, that memories who are still remaining within me. Today, looking at the situation after 11 years, Yazidis in Iraq continue to face deep insecurity and marginalization following the genocide that was committed. We are still living in displacement, ongoing marginalization, weak governance, and lack of reconstruction. Hate speech and discrimination remain and there's a limited to our ability to influence the decision-making about our safety and future in the country that we live in. For us also, as a witness of the genocide, as survivors of genocide, that justice remains very just symbolic for us. Most perpetrators who have committed the crimes are not held accountable. And without bringing those people who committed crimes, for us, the healing is incomplete as a survivors and also as a witness of genocide. Living in displacement is not only a loss of a place, it's a loss of sense of our normal life. We carry that grief. We live into IDP camps, whether we are living the countries or the workplace that we are in or the classrooms that we are in. That grief remains within us as someone who facing or witnessing the genocide. Today, as we honor the Contemporary Martyrs Day, we are not only remembering those who were killed, but we are also recognizing those who survived and who continues to live with the consequences of persecution. Survivor itself becomes a form of testimony, and remembrance, when paired with action, became a form of justice. Today, I am here as a witness of genocide, speaking on behalf of others who are still facing persecution because of who they are, because of their beliefs. And I want for all the world and who are listening to stand with the people and bring the survivors into the table and bring their stories ahead. And so together we can put a stop here and fight together for the rights of everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Huon, for sharing with us the story of the Yazidi community. And I would encourage everyone who is joining us today also to look online. on the website of Free Yazidi Foundation, and the incredible work that they do to empower survivors of the Yazidi genocide, whether it's the bakery that is breaking the stigma around the community in Iraq, or a toy shop which is making incredible toys. All of them are made by survivors of the Yazidi genocide. All have a small tiny sticker that says this toy was made by a survivor of the Yazidi genocide. And I do carry one of those little toys with me every single day. So thank you very much, Yuan, for all your incredible work, working with survivors of the Yazidi genocide and supporting them, empowering them. And now I would like to give the floor to Alex Crawford, OBE, Sky News special correspondent, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the situation of the Rohingya in Myanmar, but of course who covered also the Yazidi genocide, including with the newest documentary, 10 Years of Darkness, and also recently traveled to Syria to cover also the situation in the country. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Evelina. Yes, I am a reporter, a witness, basically, to genocide and ethnic cleansing and persecution, a large amount of persecution of religious minorities. And the United Nations once called the Muslim Rohingya the most persecuted minority in the world. What a label, what a stain that that label exists at all. Somehow in this league of worldwide suffering, Rohingya get the top spot, at least at one stage. But the plight of the Rohingya is not unique. It has familiarities with so many other persecuted people. The Rohingya, just to give you a little bit of background in case you're not aware, they've got no recognition as an ethnic religious minority in largely Buddhist Myanmar, even though they've got roots there which go back centuries. They're considered the world's largest stateless population, and they've been denied citizenship rights in that country, formerly known as Burma, since 1982. That very clear-cut but simple denial of basic rights has meant then and now that they are peculiarly vulnerable to all manner of persecution. The most horrendous kind of persecution and suffering that you can imagine, and probably much more than our minds will allow us to create. They've suffered for a long time. And I saw that persecution up close and very, very personal at first hand when I travelled with my small team, camera crew, a producer and cameraman, Neville Lazarus and Martin Smith, to Bangladesh at the height of one of the worst violent episodes in a history of violence against the Rohingya in 2017, more than 8 years ago, when there was a mass exodus of Muslim Rohingya from Myanmar across to Bangladesh. At that stage, there were an estimated 750,000 people who'd fled the violence in Myanmar. And what was happening in Myanmar, but most foreign journalists and outsiders couldn't get access to, was there was mass burning of, there was mass rape, there was mass killing. There was all manner of atrocities going on inside Myanmar, but it was largely shut off to the outside world, with the ruling junta declaring that this was just fake news and it wasn't happening. So my team managed to persuade a fisherman to take us across the Naf River from Bangladesh across to Rakhine State in Myanmar. It's a relatively short journey. Should only take about, with a motorboat, a fishing boat, about 3.5 hours or so. But remember, the long land border between Bangladesh and Myanmar was shut, and the Naf River, Bangladeshi authorities were trying to stem this flow of frantic terrified humans who were trying to flee Myanmar. So we went at the dead of night everything was absolutely pitch black, no light at all, because we didn't want to alert either the Bangladeshi authorities or the Myanmar authorities to try to cross over to Rakhine State, where we were told there were people trapped on the beach. At that time, we had no way of knowing it. It was just hearsay with people telling us that this was what was going and what we'd find there. When we landed, we could see spotlights on the beach, and we realized there were people there who were trying to guide us in. The fisherman stopped some way off from the beach because he realized the boat was going to get absolutely stormed. And I just want to tell you three very few snapshot stories of this human tide of suffering that we saw when we landed on the beach, because we couldn't see very much apart from the people in front of us and this ginormous noise. But my cameraman had an infrared light on and he could see everything in brilliant green. And one of the first people I came across, and I think what's significant from this story is that there was absolutely no time to get any names or details of these people, but there was just a crescendo of noise of them wailing and crying out for help. And one of the first women I saw was this very, very, very underfed older woman who was near collapse, who sort of collapsed on top of me. And I remember putting my hand on her arm and my fingers sort of being able to go right round her arm with space, because she was so frail and skinny. And we had only a certain amount of time with which to get the evidence, as much evidence as we could, talk to as many people as we could before the Myanmar soldiers saw us. The people told us that there was mines further up which were stopping them retreating back into the country, but they were trapped on this beach with no access to food, people. The only way out was crossing this river. So they were frantically building their own boats made out of plastic bottles and wood that they gathered from the nearby forest. Many said they'd been there for many weeks, some more than a month, that they were starved of food, they didn't have much water, they were all very thin, they were all very desperate. A number of very, very young girls came up to us holding babies, and when I asked, I could see they were very young babies. One had only been born the day before, another one 7 days before. One of them still had the umbilical cord attached. These girls were very young. They spoke about pregnancy through rape. They felt they had absolutely no chance of survival. They were either going to die on that beach or they were going to try and get some way of swimming across, which was, there were very, very few options. It was a really desperate scene. I think I just want to say that even though that seems like a long time ago, 2017, more than 8 years ago, that case of genocide and ethnic cleansing is still before the International Criminal Court, with no sign of justice or resolution or a let-up in the persecution against the Rohingya, the Muslim Rohingya, right now to this day. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Alex, for sharing the story of the Rohingya community. And I remember also several years ago, your colleague from Sky News came to Parliament to tell us also the story of from Kachin and other minority communities who have been also targeted in the country, but we rarely heard any of those stories at the time. So thank you very much for being the witness, as you call it, and for sharing for bringing those information to us, because especially in Parliament, we can't do much unless we have access to this important information, because this information is something that will move the ministers and will move the actors who need to act upon this kind of data and evidence. So thank you very much for all your work on this. And now I would like to give the floor to Rahima Mahmoud, who is the Executive Director of Stop Uyghur Genocide, and she will share with us the story of the Uyghur community.
Thank you. Good evening, all. and thanks for the opportunity to speak about a crisis that strikes at the very heart of humanity, the ongoing genocide and religious persecution of my people, the Uyghurs, in our homeland. And it's it's an honor to speak after Alex and that very heavy story about the Rohingyas, because when we were witnessing on the television about what's happening to the Rohingyas, at the same time the Uyghurs were also facing this mass detention in the so-called re-education camps, the concentration camps. The difference is that, journalists like Alex couldn't access to really see the scale of the abuse, what was happening. And until now, we don't have, sadly, any access. So for decades, we Uyghurs, a peaceful, predominantly Muslim people, have lived under surveillance and repression. Over the past 10 years, this repression has escalated into a systematic campaign that does not only target religious leaders, but anyone with Muslim heritage and a strong cultural identity. This is not about security, as Chinese Communist Party claim. It is the criminalization of an entire people who value spirituality, culture, family, hospitality, and love. Religious practice itself has been treated as a crime. Learning the Quran, attending prayer, wearing a headscarf, ordinary acts of faith have been labeled extremism. In the Uyghur Human Rights Project report, 20 years for learning the Quran, Uyghur women received prison sentence of up to 20 years for teaching or studying or learning the Quran, sometimes for acts decades old. Faith was turned into a kind of crime. Religious leaders have been disproportionately targeted. A 2025 report by the US Commission on International Religious Freedom status states that more than 1,000 imams and religious figures have been imprisoned since 2014, forced to align with state ideology or face detention, torture, or death. But we know the figures are far higher than 1,000. This is just how much they managed to record. Among them was Muhammad Salih, a respected imam and scholar who translated the Quran into Uyghur and was regarded as one of the most moderate religious voices of our time. He died in detention. His daughter, Nazira, and Asya, both scholars, were detained. His son-in-law, the poet Adil Tunyaz, is serving a long prison sentence since 2018. Their persecution demonstrates how repression extends beyond individuals to erase families and cultural continuity. Cultural persecution is equally devastating. Professor Rahila Dawood, a leading ethnographer who dedicated her life to documenting Uyghur traditions and folklore, employed by the Xinjiang University, was disappeared in 2017 and later sentenced in secret life. Preserving culture became a punishable act. So today I take this opportunity to call upon all faith communities, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhists, and all others to stand in solidarity. Religious freedom is indivisible. When one community's faith is criminalized, all are discriminated. Raising awareness, speak their names, advocate for their release, support organizations documenting these abuses. The Uyghur people ask for nothing more than the right to believe, to preserve our culture, and to live with dignity, and your voice can help protect that right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rahima, for telling us the story of the Uyghur community. And for people who are listening to us today, very often, of course, when we hear stories of communities from far away, we think, what can we do? They're far away. It doesn't concern us. It doesn't touch us in any way. But actually, in the case of the Uyghur community, if you look around, you will find items that are made by Uyghur forced labor, products that are attained in modern-day slavery of Uyghur community. So unfortunately, it does concern us more than one would think. And Rahima, of course, provided you with a number of action points what you can do to address the situation of religious persecution and persecution based on religion or belief. And now I'll give the floor to Leon Langdon from Humanist International, who will share with us the story of persecution of non-religious or belief individuals and communities.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to join this community in marking Contemporary Martyrs Day. As mentioned, my name is Leon Langdon. I'm the Senior Advocacy Officer at Humanist International, and it is a true honor to be here and to share a platform with such powerful advocates who've spoken before me. Humanist International welcomes endlessly the opportunity to work with faith actors and to bear witness to all those who have been persecuted for exercising their right to religion or belief. Today I invite us to remember Avjit Roy and the Bangladeshi non-religious activist killed in a spate of horrific violence between 2013 and 2016. The dissemination of hit lists of non-religious activists, writers, bloggers, and publishers gripped Bangladesh and foreshadowed the killings and hung over the heads of many more. Avjit Roy was a Bangladeshi American humanist, rationalist, and secular blogger. He was the founder of Mukto Mona, meaning free mind, a non-religious blog, but also a place of community for many in Bangladesh who had no other space to ask honest questions and share in their non-religious convictions together. Avjit also worked with the International Humanist and Ethical Movement, and the collective of secular bloggers that he founded that I'm speaking about were awarded the Free Expression Award at the 2014 World Humanist Congress for their convictions in the face of threats that were leveled against them for their beliefs. On the evening of 26th of February 2015, Avjit and his wife, Rafida Bonya Ahmed, were leaving a book fair at Dhaka University where they were attacked by machete-wielding assailants. Avjit had returned to Bangladesh from America just the preceding week to celebrate the publication of a Bengali language science book. Avjit died from his wounds while his wife survived, although gravely injured. Avjit had received death threats and he had reported them, and yet he continued his work, sure in his beliefs, and he came home from the United States because staying away from his community and the work that he loved was unthinkable to him. Several members of the Mukto Mona, or Free Mind Network, which he founded, were killed in the same wave of violence, including Washiko Rahman and Anata Bijoy Das. Avjit's publisher, Faisal Arifin Dipan, who had printed his books, was murdered in his office just months later. Many, many more were attacked and gratefully survived, but were forced to either flee their homes in Bangladesh to safer countries and settle elsewhere, or to hide their beliefs. In remembering Avjit Roy and those secular bloggers who were killed, we remember those who believed that reason, dialogue, and honesty were worth protecting as a manifestation of their non-religious beliefs, and that was worth risking everything for. Roy's death was meant to silence that conviction in his work, but it did not. Many of those in his community who were not killed carry on, speaking up for their worldview and their beliefs, including his wife, who is herself a champion of the non-religious movement. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and share this space in the hopes of a peaceful, pluralistic society where none live in fear of persecution for their religion or belief.
Thank you very much, Leon. And indeed, many of the stories we hear sometimes being raised in Parliament, in the UK Parliament, but also across many other parliaments, where parliamentarians make sure that the stories of humanists and people of non-religious belief are also raised among many other situations that we hear every single day, whether of persecution of Christians or of Muslims and many more. And something what We hear very often as well, and especially Bishop Philip Mount Stephen, the Lord Bishop of Winchester, often say in Parliament is that, of course, persecution of one community is like a canary in the mine. Persecution based on religion, I believe, is a canary in the mine. It means that other religious communities or non-religious communities are most likely persecuted as well, and then also that other human rights are violated as well. And now I would like to give the floor to Annabel Knight Jalili, who is the board member of the Baha'i community, who is going to share with us the story of persecution and resilience.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here, and so inspiring to have heard all these stories so far. I'm just going to share a short story from the Baha'i community that originated during the extreme persecutions following the Islamic Revolution of 1979. So this is a story that began on June the 18th, 1983, when 10 Baha'i women were executed by the Islamic fundamentalist clergy in Shiraz, Iran. And all that they had to do to save their own lives was to renounce their Baha'i beliefs. They were given many opportunities to deny their faith during long and tortuous imprisonments and interrogations, but they chose not to. And the youngest amongst them, who's the subject of the story that I would like to tell, she was a girl called Mona, and she was 17 years old. So Mona was described by those who knew her as very beautiful, very kind, always smiling. She had green eyes and long brown hair, and she was an exceptional student. She was intellectually bright. She wrote poetry. She loved music and dancing, and she had a beautiful singing voice. So in short, she had this real passion for life, and she loved people intensely, especially younger children. And in fact, she saw it as her duty to teach Baha'i children, since so many of them were denied access to formal education. Her love for children was not just for those of her own faith, because she was a lover of all humanity, according to the Baha'i teachings. Whilst she was in school, she wrote with great passion on the subject of religious freedom, which is something we've obviously been all talking about this evening. And these are some of her words. She said, "Why don't you let me be free to say who I am and what I want and to reveal my religion to others? Why don't you give me freedom of speech so that I may write for publications or talk on the radio or television about my ideas? Yes, liberty is a divine gift, and this gift is for us also, but you don't let us have it. Why don't you let me speak freely as a Baha'i?" Now, these were words in a school essay, and they were later used as evidence to justify her imprisonment and her execution. Because she was arrested on October the 23rd, 1982, and she was given the choice many times to recant her faith in exchange for her freedom. But she always replied that she would rather die than deny her beliefs, and she endured many months of pain and abuse before finally being sentenced to death. A few months before she was martyred, it is recorded that Mona had a series of dreams about Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And in one of these dreams, he presented her with a box containing a beautiful red cloak. And in this dream, he unwrapped it in front of her and he said, "This is the cloak of martyrdom in my path. Do you accept it?" And Mona in her dream was speechless until finally she heard her own voice say, "Whatever pleases you." Perhaps this dream was what gave her the strength to face her execution when she was hanged alongside 9 other Baha'i women. The hangings took place over cover of darkness in a field. These women were conscious and they were motivated by the principles which gave them a greater sense of the purpose and meaning of this earthly life. And in a final attempt to terrorize them into recanting, these women were hanged one by one, while the remaining women watched their approaching fate. And Mona asked to be last so that she could pray for the strength of the others. And when her turn came, she calmly walked to the platform and said a prayer for humanity, and kissed the rope and placed it around her own neck. Now, Mona's mother recalls one of the last conversations that she'd had with her daughter, where Mona had shared these words, and she says, "If I knew that because of my execution, all the youth in the world would arise and join hands in service to humanity, if they were to become selfless, to teach the Baha'i ideals and to move the world, I would beg God to give me 100,000 lives to sacrifice in his path." So it's been over 40 years since that day in Shiraz. And in the year of the 40th anniversary, a couple of years ago, there was a global campaign called Our Story is One to honor the lives of Mona and the women of Shiraz. And it inspired from diverse people around the world, artistic and dramatic and musical tributes to those who had sacrificed for their ideals and for the advancement of humanity and for religious freedom, and hopefully for the raising up of the next generation of educators and peacemakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabelle, for sharing this the story with us. And something what I noted from your speech is very much the question, why don't you let me be free? And I think this is something that we research every single day when looking into evidence of international crimes, atrocity crimes, and especially where we are talking about, of course, persecution based on religion or belief. And it goes very much to the anatomy of persecution that requires more attention, more understanding, and of course, responses. And especially now that the international rules-based order is crumbling, as we see it every single day. And now I'll give the floor to Mervyn Thomas, founder of CSW and chair of the UK Forbes Forum, to share with us some reflections.
Thank you so much, Evelina, and thank you, Your Eminence, for organising this day every year, such an important event in the world of freedom of religion or belief. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. CSW is an organisation, we're a Christian organisation, but as you said at the beginning, Your Eminence, it's important as Christians that we speak out against all injustice, people of all faiths and none. The Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 31 that we're to speak up for those unable to speak for themselves. And I remember particularly when we started off as an organisation, when I founded it, we were speaking up just for Christians. And in fact, it was the Rohingya, the plight of the Rohingya, that first made me realise we needed to speak up again for people of other faiths who were persecuted too. And over the years, I've travelled to Sinjar, and soon after Daesh left Sinjar, and I've travelled to see the Yazidi community. I've certainly, I believe it was CSW. I'm pretty sure it was CSW that broke the news of the Uyghurs through the BBC in the first instance. We've campaigned for Mubarak Bala and many other humanists, and also for members of the Baha'i community. So this is something that I've been doing and we've been doing at CSW for many years, because we live in a world where 80% of people live in countries that have high or very high restrictions on freedom of religion or belief. And today we remember those whose names we may never know: prisoners of conscience, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, students, whose only crime was to pray differently, to worship differently, or to decline to worship or pray at all. As we've already heard today, their stories span continents, cultures, and faith traditions. They remind us that freedom of religion or belief is not an abstract principle, it's a lived reality, and for far too many, a dangerous one at that. FORB is a right that's enshrined in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it's a right that is inherent to human dignity. It's a right, we should remember, it's a right to protect individuals, not religions. It's a right which must be respected by people of all faiths and none, and it's a right which must be protected by people of all faiths and none. So we've heard stories from the various different faith communities today. Let me tell you a couple of stories from the Christian community. In Sudan, Father Luka Jomo was a Catholic priest who lived and worked in El Fasher, Darfur, and impacted the lives of many. One resident recalled, during his time, the Catholic Church in El Fasher was more than a place of worship for Christians. He opened its doors to Muslims, housing a kindergarten where many local children began their education. Now those children are adults and have taken many positions in the city. He also opened the church grounds for sports, providing offices and headquarters for the local football club. Furthermore, the church provided a free clinic and free medicine to all. As the war intensified, Father Luka remained in his parish, serving all those in need. He cared deeply for the most vulnerable, the elderly and children. And in June last year, the Rapid Support Forces attacked his church along with 2 other churches in El Fasher. Father Luka was critically injured and later died of his injury. He had stood with the city of El Fasher throughout its long siege and was a much loved and subsequently much mourned by the whole community. And in Nigeria, in the continuing spate of abductions for ransom, which the litany of terrorist factions operating in Nigeria supplement their income, Christian leaders, their families, and congregations are particularly targeted for abduction for ransom and even execution. At around 2 a.m. last October, on 28th of October, the Venerable Edwin H.E., his wife Sarah, and their daughter were abducted by the Nisi community from the Nisi community in Chikan local government area by Fulani militia who attacked their home. They demanded an incredible ransom of around £300,000, which was subsequently reduced to 100,000. And in fact, the money was found and paid to the captors. Yet still in November, Van Etche was killed and the family members were instructed to retrieve his body. A family representative concluded he was killed simply for being a man of God. Contemporary martyrs are not only those who die, they're also those who endure imprisonment, torture, social ostracism and economic deprivation for their beliefs. They're journalists silenced for defending religious minorities. They're lawyers who defend prisoners of conscience. They're neighbours who stand beside their targeted communities. Their courage challenges us to defend the rights of those whose beliefs differ from our own. Commemoration, though, without commitment is empty. So today, let us do more than remember. Let us recommit. Let us recommit to speaking out when religious minorities are targeted. Let us recommit to building bridges across faith traditions. And let us recommit to upholding the rule of law and the universality of human rights. And may our remembrance today strengthen our resolve to ensure that one day no one anywhere will suffer or die for what they believe.
Thank you very much, Mervyn, for calling upon us to recommit, and this is indeed what we need to do. And now we have a special video to share with you, and we invite you to reflect on a message from Annie Ogden, one of the participants of the first cohort of the London for Presidential for Young Adult Changemakers, an intensive week-long program focused on developing expertise in freedom of religion belief advocacy, co-hosted by Refcemi and BYU International Center for Law and Religious Studies in partnership with Rising Generation.
I learned a story today about 2 people, and I would love to share it with you. Luca was born in Egypt, and he is a person of faith. He grew up in the Coptic Orthodox Church. When he was 27, which is my age, he was martyred. He was part of a group of men who on February 15th, 2015, were lined up on a beach They were told to denounce their faith, and they all refused to denounce it, and they were all killed. Matthew was the 21st person on that beach. He was from Ghana and had a different background and was different in many ways from the men that were before him. But he was given the same chance to denounce the faith, and he would be set free. He said, "Their God is my God." And he was killed. And that's been in my mind, their God is my God. And I just have been asking myself, not only would I be willing to be Luca, a person willing to die for my faith, but am I willing to stand with people like Matthew, to be the type of friend that sees the suffering of people different from me and is willing to stand with them and by them, even if it is hard for me to do so? To see people and recognize them and remember them. To remember that there are people around the world right now that are suffering because of their beliefs. And if you're one of those people and you're watching this video, just know that no matter who you are a person of worth and value. You deserve to be stood by one. The more we all choose to care and stand with each other, the more the world is going to change, the better the world is going to be. And I think it starts with remembering. When I choose to remember and to see people like Luca and Matthew and all of the other martyrs on that day, by the way, remembering them is what ensures that their witness was not wasted.
And now I would like to give the floor to Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire, Robert Voss.
Thank you very much. It's been extremely moving listening to these heartbreaking stories. But I would just like to very briefly tell you the story of my own family. My parents were both refugees from Nazi Germany. My late father escaped in mid-1939, leaving behind in Germany his parents and brother. His brother escaped firstly to Holland and then to Belgium, where he was captured and spent 3 years in a concentration camp, which was not a death camp, it was a work camp from which he survived, and the family continued to live in Belgium. My grandparents were firstly forced out of their home. They'd lived in the same town in Germany, Mönchengladbach in the south, since records began in 1650. They were not particularly religious, but they were Jewish and had a typical middle-class life. In 1941, they were forced out of their home into what is called a Judenhaus, which was a decrepit two-bedroom flat in which there were 18 people sharing 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom in one of the worst parts of the town. In June 1942, on the 12th of June, they were ordered to appear at Düsseldorf railway station and told they were going to be sent to the east to find work, and were told to bring a suitcase with enough clothes for 3 days' journey, and were even forced to pay 50 Deutschmarks for their own journey. The journey was supposed to go to a ghetto town called Izbica in eastern Poland, but actually in 2017 the BBC took me to Germany and discovered a telegram from Adolf Eichmann diverting the train into Sobibor, which was a newly opened death camp, and my grandparents, who obviously I never met, were in the gas chamber within 12 hours of arrival. The camp was only open for about 15 months, during which time about 250 to 300,000 Jews from Germany and Holland principally were murdered. My father died age 50, his brother died age 50, his sister died age 50, all of different things. So I maintain that actually the pain and the sorrow continued long after the war and is even now being felt by my generation and my children's generation and my grandchildren's generation. None of us who ever knew our grandparents, great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. But this is just one of many stories which we've heard this evening. You may say it's a long time ago. Yes, it is 80 years ago, but sadly, it can never be forgotten. So I'm very grateful to all those who've bravely given stories of their own genocides in recent years, and to His Eminence for arranging this evening. And one can only hope and pray that these stories teach us something, and we have all learned from history, albeit a little distant past and more recent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor back to His Eminence Archbishop Angelos.
Thank you, Evelina. These are all so sobering, and Huon with the Yazidis, who could forget what happened in Sinjar Mountain and this act of genocide? And as you rightly say, not speaking leads us to a sense of impunity, and we are reminded by what Bonhoeffer has said is silence in the face of a crime is a crime itself. Alex, you did exactly what you've called us to do, and that is being a witness. And it's so important for us to witness. It's not just enough for us to experience or to empathize, but to witness, to speak, to tell people, to present a narrative that others may not be able to present for themselves, and especially when there is this sense of statelessness that you spoke about. Rahima, with the Uyghur community, being hidden, being repressed, being criminalized. And it does become systemic and systematic. And we see that, as we heard our dear friend Lord David Alton say in the past, it is indicative of even greater persecution that happens when we see one community being criminalized in this way. In Leon, the story of humanists, of bloggers who are trying to express and deprived of that sense of expression. And your understanding and reminding us that pluralism is not something that we should be afraid of. And that ties into Annabelle. And again, those wonderful words from Mona, let me be free to say who I am, to live who I am, to express who I am. And just that leads to arrest and execution. And the concept of this cloak of martyrdom, regrettably, is one that is worn by so many people in this generation. Mervyn, as you said, commemoration without commitment is not enough. And I think that is where we need to understand that we need to commit and recommit and recommit. And my dear friend Lord Lieutenant telling us to learn from history. We've heard never again so many times, and yet it happens again and again and again. One thing that we've seen through this is the double persecution of minorities within minorities, and that quite sadly falls very often on women and girls. And that becomes, in and of itself, an even greater crime when they are so vulnerable. They are commodified in this 21st century, and we should know better. Proverb 31:8 says to us, it says, open your mouth for the speechless. And I think that is what we're trying to do today. When we look at the lives of the Libya martyrs, in opening their mouths and saying the name of Christ, they presented strength, a Christian resilience, but a lesson to us all to represent our own Christian brothers and sisters, but also all of you have spoken today and those who did not have an opportunity. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is something we all mention, that is freedom to hold, to change, to manifest publicly or privately a belief. And I think that is incredibly important. Martin Luther King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that is really important to us all. So what are we trying to do today? We're trying to raise awareness. We're trying to support, and we were called not just to look at victims, but survivors. And we as a church very much believe in this strain of being survivors, not letting persecution break us or make us bitter, but actually looking at the spiritual, the pastoral, and the public responsibility that we have. So while we mourn the death of our brothers in Libya and all those we've mentioned today, we remember that their strength should be remembered, so that their death is not merely forgotten and lost, but that we are able to use that strength as reason for ourselves. Before I conclude, I just want to mention a few very dear friends who are online particularly. We had, of course, the Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire, His Excellency Ivan Ramiro Martinez, who's the Ambassador of Honduras, but who's the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. His Excellency, the Ambassador of Sudan, Deputy Head of Mission of the Hungarian Embassy, Baroness Gaudi, Laura Marks, our dear friend, Pastor Agu, Bishop Rowe, and Father Schnork representing His Grace Bishop Hurricane. We pray for our sisters and brothers in Armenia at the moment. Also, Lord Cecil and so many of our friends, and to our wonderful team here. It goes without say that we thank Evelina Ohab, who is a wonderful advocate, and our Deputy Director of Refcemi, to Geraldine, who actually put all this together, to Angela in my office, and to all of those who have worked, and Karim, who's been providing technical support. With that, I thank you all, and I pass back to Evelina.
Thank you very much, Sayedna. And as we conclude, I would like to say a big kudos to all speaking today. Thank you for joining us today, and make sure that you stay in touch. The dire situation globally will not change overnight. It will also not change if we look away. You cannot do it all, but there's always something you can do. So stay informed and stay involved. Thank you very much.